The signs of Donald's unraveling, physical, cognitive, and otherwise, are becoming impossible to miss. They're growing worse every day as his failures, both here and abroad, just continue to mount. Over the weekend in Scotland, he sat down with Pod Force One host Miranda Devine. During that interview, as always, he lied, rambled, and flailed in an increasingly desperate bid to distract from his weeks long string of scandals. Devine is best known for throwing Donald the softest of softballs, happily playing cheerleader to his most inane and incomprehensible comments, which is exactly what he craves. Somebody cheering on his every move, no matter how benighted or stupid. Even in this friendly setting, however, he managed to become undone. The clearest example of this is his obsessive, incoherent ranting about Democrats in the 2020 election. All of that still apparently continues to live rent-free in his head. Here's just one bit of that.
They did on the Russia hoax. Russia. You know it was false. You know it was all bullshit. A real hoax, you know. It was absolutely disgusting. And yeah, I would say it was serious treason. A real hoax. Obama, what he did was terrible. Hillary Clinton, you look at all of the terrible things with the Steele dossier. He did the Steele dossier. He had Hillary Clinton down to whatever we wanted to do with it. What Brennan did and Clapper, and Comey. Clapper lied to Congress. Comey lied to everybody. Brennan. These are all bad. These are lowlifes. These are losers. They're stupid people, actually. And we had an incompetent guy that never left his basement because, you know, he was incompetent 25 years ago. And Joe at his best was an incompetent. They took him out. They put Kamala. Nobody knew who Kamala was. But how about Crockett? Crockett's their new star.
Yeah, that's right.
And she's a low IQ person. These people are crazy, so you never know what's going to happen.
Donald, I've told you this repeatedly. Stop looking in the mirror when you're talking to reporters. It's embarrassing. You're just telling on yourself. Stupid, low IQ. Yeah, you get the picture. Now, clearly, Donald, even in the most controlled setting, cannot keep it together. It's pathetic. He is so pathetic. But all of this has a purpose. Like he's not just ranting about this stuff because he's obsessed with it, which he is. He's ranting about it publicly and without stopping in order to distract his base from the real scandal, which continues to unfold, largely because Donald is so desperate to have us avoid it. And that, of course, is the self-imposed catastrophe of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Donald seems convinced that if he can somehow manage to whip up enough fake outrage about Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, maybe everybody will forget that he is undeniably linked to a convicted sex offender of the worst kind. If you thought Democrats were his biggest enemy, though, think again. Donald spent precious airtime attacking his true nemesis. I mean, like a nemesis to end all nemesis, truly. Both foreign and domestic, there is literally no nemesis to out-nemesis this nemesis. Take a look.
And I told them they have to stop that. They have to stop windmills all over the place, too. You got hills and mountains, and you got windmills. It's a pretty far distance, but it doesn't matter. These things are massive. And you're looking at these ugly windmills. I can't believe they really want to kill the birds, ruins the look. They're noisy. If you see them while you're at it, get rid of the windmills.
Yeah. So
I think it's a very bad thing. Environmentally, it's horrible, and in every way, it's bad.
I think it's a bit much for a guy to complain about eyesores when he actually lives at Mar-a-Lago. So, while Donald talking in the most bizarre way, quite frankly, about windmills is nothing new, this particular fixation has its history in Scotland. It goes back years. In 2012, a new wind farm was proposed as a green energy source in Scotland, but the wind turbines would partially obstruct his view on his Scottish golf course, vehemently opposing the windmills because, again, they interrupted his view. Donald appeared before the Scottish Parliament in order to block the development, claiming they would destroy Scottish tourism. He took the case all the way through the Scottish legal system, sound familiar, up to the UK Supreme Court. And he lost. The turbines were built anyway, and they are now clearly visible from his golf resort. Good, because that probably drives him crazy. Donald versus the windmills will go down as one of the most one-sided fights ever waged by a US president because obviously, the windmills are going to win. Why are they going to win? Well, one, they're effective. Two, they understand how to save money. And three, they actually work. Also, they're prettier, but that's irrelevant. Anyway, anybody who obsesses about this kind of thing without keeping the focus narrowed to how windmills are a blight, for example, which I don't think they are, or that somehow they aren't economically feasible, which of course they are, but at least be consistent. He goes off on the rails. He talks about how birds are going to die and whales are dying and how windmills are truly the greatest threat to the future of humanity. Donald's interview in Scotland did not just expose how seriously in decline he is. It highlighted his obvious physical deterioration. I mean, actually, at the beginning of that clip, I was wondering when they were going to wake him up for the interview. This was a painful interview to watch, as are they all. But then there was something else that became difficult to ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for future reference, any Fox host should just provide a box of Kleenex. That would solve all sorts of problems, perhaps. While at the grand opening of his golf course yesterday, Donald faced the crowd without his usual makeup on. You know, he isn't looking particularly healthy. Again, this is not an ad hominem attack. I don't care if he wears makeup. I don't care what he does with his hair. I don't care about any of that. But the person in charge of the United States of America should be healthy. And he looks quite ill at this point. I'm not interested in going after low-hanging fruit. But part of it, too, is just the hypocrisy. Remember Sleepy Joe? Remember that? Sleepy Joe Biden? Again, during that interview, it seemed like Donald was barely conscious. He also mocked Biden for his alleged cognitive decline, and he mocked Biden for looking old. Donald is starting to look every bit, well, I don't think it's fair to say he's starting to. How would we know? Because he's always wearing makeup and he bleaches his hair. Again, fine, I don't care, but face facts. He's starting to look his age when he's not wearing his makeup and his hair isn't done. Speaking of things that look bad, other than Donald's cognitive abilities and his physical health, he also spoke about the U.S. economy. Since Donald's policies are hurting our country's economy so severely, the only way to make any of that sound good was for him to lie about it, which he has become quite adept at in this particular context. So he lies and then he quickly pivots away from the topic. Take a look.
You know, if you think inflation, I've already taken care of. Prices are way down for everything, groceries, everything. He had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
Joe Biden, yeah.
Biden. So now inflation's down. All these things we're doing so great. But the one thing we really have to keep focused on for a long time is getting the criminals out of our country that this guy let in.
Lie about inflation, lie about grocery prices, blame Joe Biden, pivot to criminals and immigration. It's the same thing over and over and over again, while in reality, the economy, of course, is not thriving under Donald's policies. In fact, yesterday, the Associated Press reported that Donald's tariffs and the global chaos they've created could increase factory costs by 2 to 4%. Even worse, quote, a June survey by the Atlanta Federal Reserve suggested companies would on average pass half of their tariff costs on to United States consumers through higher prices. Labor Department data show America lost 14,000 manufacturing jobs after Donald rolled out his April tariffs, unquote. Then came Donald's fantasy world of amazing trade deals. Check it out.
You have managed to get a trade deal with Europe, the biggest trade deal ever. How did you pull that off?
Well, we've been dealing a long time, and I have a lot of respect for the group. And as you know, you have a woman president who's very, very brilliant and very good, very talented at what she does, Ursula, who you know. And we made it is the biggest deal ever made, I guess you could say. And when you think of it, we were getting nothing in the old days, you know, meaning prior to this, we were getting nothing, and now we're getting a lot.
And who's next?
Well, we're dealing with China. We sort of have the confines of a deal, but we're dealing with China. We just concluded a deal, as you know, with Japan, where they're going to pay $550 billion, and lots of good things are happening there. We were a dead country a year ago, and now we're the most vibrant, we're the coolest country, they say, in the world. But I think we're the most successful country in the world right now. We're doing numbers that nobody would have believed is really even possible.
Oh, yes, nobody would have believed it was possible. So much of what he said there is a lie, or misrepresentation or disinformation, what have you. And, you know, I'm in listening to him talk about the EU and the president of the EU, I'm thinking, is he so vapid that he thinks that what works on him will work on other people? Just compliment them, say they're brilliant. Because I'm telling you, he would not have said the same thing about any of this if he hadn't gotten his way. So it's just a reminder how pathetic and easily manipulated this person is. He also can't seem to decide if the United States is the hottest country in the world or the coolest. But if everything keeps going the way it's going vis-a-vis climate change, it certainly will be the hottest or among them. By the way, his deals, so-called, are massive failures. Politico tore into them, and after basically analyzing every aspect of them, exposing them for what they are: all talk, no action. Donald's claim that he has made agreements with the EU, Japan, the UK, and others aren't even concretized yet. So they're certainly not enforceable. They're filled with inconsistencies, conflicting interpretations, and empty promises from foreign companies that their own governments cannot even guarantee. Only one deal with the UK is actually signed, and it's very thin on the substance. Most of the leaders Donald name checks have quietly walked back his claims or clarified that these aren't real deals at all, just vague political theater. Meanwhile, trade talks with China are collapsing. As CNBC reports, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent left Stockholm yesterday with no progress on a new trade agreement. If Donald lets the tariff truce expire, the disastrous 34% tariffs currently in place on China could remain operative. Meanwhile, in Brazil, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is growing more and more frustrated with Donald's trade tactics. The New York Times reports that President Lula sees Donald's 50% tariff threat as retaliation for prosecuting former President Jair Bolsonaro for leading an attempted coup after losing Brazil's most recent election. I know it's mystifying. Like, what exactly about that strikes a chord with Donald Trump? Lula stated, quote, Donald's behavior strayed from all standards of negotiations and diplomacy. When you have a commercial disagreement, a political disagreement, you pick up the phone, you schedule a meeting, you talk, and you try to solve the problem. What you don't do is tax and give an ultimatum, unquote. Also, what you don't do is interfere with the internal politics of another country. Lula did not stop there. He called Donald's threats disgraceful and warned that Americans, not just Brazilians, will pay the price, calling it a lose-lose relationship. Lula has now understandably threatened retaliatory tariffs on the United States, furthering escalating the standoff. These so-called negotiations are just embarrassing, and quite frankly, they're embarrassing specifically to Donald because they so obviously are part of his ineffectual campaign to change the subject away from the fact that he was a close associate and very close friend for over 15 years of a man who we know was a notorious and horrific abuser, sex trafficker, and rapist of girls and young women. See, Donald, it's not working. So before we go on, calling out Donald's unraveling mental state is essentially a full-time job. So please like and share this video. And if you believe in our mission, please subscribe to our channel. There is some good news for Donald, which is becoming less and less common. When you're interviewed by total sycophants like this particular host, Miranda Devine, you can ignore your failures and talk about whatever you want to. Case in point, the laws affecting Donald's Scottish golf course. He threw in an anecdote that left his interviewer grasping at straws, which is really saying something because she's quite adept at complimenting the most absurd statements Donald makes. But take a look at this.
And you're opening a new golf course in your mother's town?
Yeah, we started it a couple of years ago, and it's a very beautiful, beautiful piece of land. And it's going to be very good. I have a course there. And I had to start this within a certain period of time where I lost the zoning. And Sean Connery got me the zoning.
Yeah, what did he do?
So Sean Connery, I didn't know him well. I met him one time, but he liked me. I liked him. And, and he's a tough kind of a guy, as you probably know. If you look at the Barbara Walters interview, you know what I'm talking about. But he was a tough guy and beloved in Scotland. And, he was the first James Bond and all of the things. And he let out a howl once. He said, "Let the bloody bloke build his damn golf courses and let him put money into our country. What's wrong with you?" And as soon as he said that, the whole thing got approved like so fast. It was crazy.
You do a very good Scottish accent.
Yeah, well.
Does he? What? I mean, I've seen So I Married an Axe Murderer, and Mike Myers does a good Scottish. I don't know what that was. Anyway, that's really not the point, but it's making me blush because I'm so embarrassed by it. Also, I don't know if you guys know this, but Sean Connery beat women. And I don't really think that that's the kind of person. Oh, wait, what am I talking about? This is Donald Trump here. Of course, that's the kind of person he wants on his side. Listen, the idea, it's okay on occasion for presidents to talk about personal stuff and people they know and actors they admire or what have you. But again, Donald refers to Connery as a tough guy. Watch that interview with Barbara Walters, he says, which occurred in 1987. That is the one in which Connery not just admitted to, but justified hitting women. That is the kind of man Sean Connery is. That is the kind of man Donald Trump admires. And I'm telling you, potentially, that is the kind of man Donald Trump is. Oh, wait, what do I mean, potentially? Never forget, a jury of his peers found him liable for raping a woman. It is so sad that 74 million Americans did not seem to think that that was a deal breaker. Anyway, the kind of detours Donald made during this interview, if you want to even call it that, made him appear unserious and absolutely out of touch with the gravity of both his role and the situation he's in. Donald eventually pivoted to a more personal subject. His mother, my grandmother. Take a look.
My mother was born in Scotland. She loves Scotland. She was a big fan of the Queen, I have to tell you. And anytime the Queen was on television, my mother liked watching. She said, "Oh, the Queen's on." So, she was a fan. A lot of people are, and some people probably aren't in terms of the monarchy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are.
And your mother's island of Lewis is well known as having the best black pudding
In the whole of Scotland.
I heard that.
Do you like black
Well, I don't know about black pudding. I've heard that about it, but I'll tell you, it says among the most beautiful landscapes you've ever seen. I'd say It's seriously Scottish.
Yes, my grandmother loved Scotland so much. As far as I'm aware, she never took Donald there. Like maybe once. I know she never took my dad there. So it is true. It is very true because I have been to Lewis, although I'm telling you, if that interviewer hadn't said that his mother was from the Isle of Lewis, Donald would not have known that. It is a quite extraordinarily beautiful place, but I can't actually say that it's any more seriously Scottish than any other place in Scotland because I think by definition, any place in Scotland is seriously Scottish. But what do I know? Anyway, this is just yet another example of the increasingly controlled environment Donald needs to be placed in order to protect himself and those enablers around him from the fallout of his being let loose in an uncontrolled media environment. However, what we are seeing increasingly, that even with the most supine and sycophantic interviewer, Donald cannot keep it together. So it doesn't matter anymore how much they protect him because he can't stay on track. He cannot remember where he is or who he's with or what he's supposed to be talking about. So all the more reason for us to magnify these kinds of interviews, even if I know they may seem unserious, but they give us more information than we might otherwise have about Donald Trump's state of mind, and perhaps more importantly, what it is that is taking up so much space in his very, very damaged brain. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.